If you can and you're willing to support us, please do so. We'd really appreciate it. We're trying to expand the platform, trying to pay these bills. You can go to dgutspodcast.com. That's Don't Give Up the Ship apparel, some naval pride and heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. Get shirts, hoodies, shower shoes, drawstring bags, all kinds of cool stuff. Dope stickers like these. You can get logo stickers. We got the Enlisted Deviant stuff, all kinds of cool stuff. More to come. Working on lots of designs all the time. We also have the podcast challenge coin, just came out. I'm really proud of that. And then if you also are willing to and able to, please go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast. A lot of really cool benefits, tiers, all kinds of cool stuff to try to drive support for the financial side of the platform. There's demands on all of the things that I want to do to expand, cost money, all the services and subscriptions and all those things. And I am trying to turn this thing into a business and a job so that I can do that and devote all my time to providing more content, services, whatever I can do that helps you out. So if you're willing and able, please go to dgutspodcast.com. You can also go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast and become a member today. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Ship podcast, episode 115. And today, talking to a pretty interesting fellow. He's a youngish chief petty officer, and he is the dude that is basically responsible for the MCPON Reddit AMA, which I thought was really interesting because on the response episode, I speculated on how it happened. I was just like, this had to be a staff, or like, there's no way. Like, he was barely like aware of what Reddit was. And even if he kind of knew what it was, he didn't know how it worked or whatever. And turns out, this dude, Chris, he engaged, he tells the story, but he engaged someone and it turned in, with the help of retired Fleet Master Chief Joanne Ortloff, like, passing a note in class to the MCPON, we got that Reddit AMA, and he like promised to engage, and it's pretty cool. It's a really cool story, and had it not been for him pressing it, I don't think it would have happened at all. And like, obviously, had it not, Joanne coming in clutch, but like, had it not been for Chris, like, we would have never got that in general, I don't think, or at least it would have been a while until a couple more MCPONs maybe before somebody who was already aware just decided to start engaging on this platform. So very cool origin story for that Reddit AMA that we get into. And then Chris does a lot of really interesting things, writes a lot of articles that are awesome. And I mean, objectively awesome, because they're winning essay contests at USNI, which is not, is no small feat, but on Proceedings Magazine. And then, he's into a lot of other things. Surface Navy Association, just a bunch of interesting involvement in things that you may not even be aware of, but that can be really important and have the capacity to like do really cool things. So we get into all that. We get into leadership things, his experience in his chief's messes, why he thought it was good, why he thought it was bad, and anything in between. Really great conversation, really great dude, and I hope you all enjoy it. Check it out. All right, man. So like we just talked about, we'll do the bio first. So just give me as much information on your background as you're comfortable with sharing, and then we'll go from there.
So I enlisted in 2010 at age 17 on waivers. Been an IS my entire career, so intelligence specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Was originally an expeditionary guy.
Mm-hmm.
So 2011 to 2013, when I was with a CB regiment, I did a tour in Afghanistan. I kind of realized even back then that this expeditionary perspective on the Navy was not going to last, because it's not what we do.
Yeah.
And as we've now seen, 10 years later, we have this thing called Russia and China going on in the world. So I jumped on the grenade. I requested back-to-back sea duty to go pick up another specialty school that allowed me to serve on ships. So like the first 6 years of my career, I did 3 deployments. After that, I went to my only shore duty, which was a combatant command in Omaha, Nebraska. So big command, joint, thousands of people, civilian, mostly Air Force. So Army, Marines, and Navy. And after that, came to where I am now, which is a big fleet concentration hub, and just been pumping out on ships, done an LPD, cruiser, and a DDG over the past 3 years, and married another chief. So I'm doing back-to-back sea duty because she's going to shore duty because she's got the kid on the way. So I'm going to be sitting at about 10 years of sea duty in a short career.
Stuck on sea duty forever. Jesus.
It's the best place to be in the Navy, in my opinion. It really is.
I mean, it's like our manifest destiny, but still, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's a long time to be on sea duty. I'm sure it helps.
Well, my sea duty's.
Well, yeah. It's different.
My sea duty's a lot easier.
Yeah, different than like the norm of like chip and paint and all that. Like, all right,
I still do that. The reason I sound sick is like on my last duty day, we had to move some lines out in the cold and the rain after dark, and I was not going to let the junior guys be the only ones while I'm sitting in the mess with the section leader. So
I like it.
That's why I'm a little stuffy right now.
Yeah, dude, it's like I feel like everybody's sick. Like I've been sick twice recently. Like I had the flu, like a nasty flu from Christmas to New Year's, and then for like 2 weeks I was still coughing crap up. And just as I was starting to feel better, I was gonna go back to the gym and everything. My wife had gotten sick a few days earlier, and then I got that crap for a couple days, and I'm just like, God damn. Like, I just want to not feel like crap, but it seems like everybody around me is sick too. Like, it's ridiculous. Yeah, man. So like let's do some background on like the reason I was put in touch with you. You were pointed out to me by someone on Reddit, as somebody that like, just like your posts and stuff were all really good and your interactions and everything, but also, I had talked about recently on the AMA response about like kind of like vaguely speculating on like who was responsible for getting Honea on a Reddit AMA. Because when you look at it without any information otherwise, it's like of all the people, like I would expect to see Russ Smith or somebody like that. And I don't know how old Honea is, but he looks a lot older than your typical MCPON. So I'm just like, dude, the last guy I expected to see on Reddit. So I was just like, this had to be his staff. It had to be. I'm like, he probably doesn't even really know what Reddit is. Turns out, like, because then a whole bunch of people corrected me, and they're like, turns out, like, it was you. So, like, tell us how that all happened.
So first, I want to give more of the credit to retired Fleet Master Chief Joanne Ortloff. So, she does her own podcast called Continuing the Conversation. She works with the Surface Navy Association.
Mm-hmm.
So for those in the audience that don't know, especially with a more enlisted audience, there are these organizations that are adjacent to the military. They're not DoD chartered. They're 501c nonprofits. A lot of them are officer heavy because the officers learn about them when they're in JROTC, when they are in the Naval Academy, but they are open to the enlisted. Mm-hmm. So to give an example, so the Surface Navy Association, and this is extremely relevant to how I ended up talking with MCPON. That's why I want to kind of introduce this concept. So you look at the enlisted side of the Navy, it's about 80% of the Navy's force and then 20% officer. But then this organization that represents academia, represents industry, represents retirees, and et cetera, is 96% officer and 80% enlisted. They have a huge problem but they are learning their communication strategy. They are learning their imaging. They want more enlisted because of the unique opportunities that these organizations provide.
Hey, I might know a guy that has a podcast that could get him some visibility with enlisted people. I'm just saying, stop by anytime.
Like I said, reach out to Joanne.
So Paul Kingsbury is going to come on soon, and he was blowing me up about Surface Navy Association and the enlisted side of it. And because I had heard about it once or twice, but I thought it was an officer organization. I didn't think it was open to enlisted, and I don't really know what they do either because I'm a bubblehead. Like I'm in my own world over here. So like, I'm interested.
So I'm still learning what they do for the enlisted side. I can tell you that for both enlisted and officer, they have both scholarships and grants for active duty service members and their family and their children. They also have symposiums. So where I'm at MCPON was at their annual symposium in DC. These kinds of events, like the one in DC, are actually, there's a NAV admin that comes out every year to support funding from the Navy to send people there. So there's opportunities for commands to get their sailors there. The same issue that we're talking about with communication strategy is also same on the Naval Institute side of the house where Paul used to work. So in a couple of weeks, I'm flying to San Diego for a conference that's kind of similar, but it's the Naval Institute's naval conference called West. And same thing, you're going to have industry all over. They take over the entire San Diego Convention Center. That's a large convention center.
Yeah, wow.
So CNO usually shows up and has a speech. Same thing with SecNav. So it's an opportunity.
Damn.
First of all, you are in the room to Q&A with them.
Yeah.
And then the entire floor is covered with like BAE, defense contractors. Yeah. So from the enlisted perspective, go shake hands, get business cards. One of my favorite stories was the first time I went to the Surface Navy Association Symposium in DC a couple of years ago. I brought with me a buddy of mine he's very gung-ho Navy. He actually joined the Navy because of me when we met in California.
Okay.
And he's an engineman. And he is an engineman who at that point had made every rank to second class twice. So he's good at his job. But he's just at that time he's
good at some other things too.
He's a first class. Hey, now he never made the same mistake twice. I know.
Just kidding. That's funny.
But he's a first class now, and I'm so proud of him.
Awesome.
So I'm there with him. So little IS-1 and my EN2 buddy. And we're walking around the floor in DC, and they've got all these like different components and parts and stuff that they're trying to sell and contract and talk about. Like, hey, this is a new version with its capabilities and stuff. And my buddy like stops and he looks at a pump. And he's like, that thing messes up, right? I'm like, what? It's like, look, I'm going to tear this apart right here, right now. So he takes apart this pump on the floor of the hotel and starts showing them how particular pump screws up every time on his specific class of ships. So now the sales reps are called
That's amazing.
Tech reps.
It's like, that's a piece of shit, right?
Some admiral would have bought it.
Yeah.
Because they're just looking at the brochure. They're looking at capabilities. They don't look at the MIP series. They don't look at the maintenance card. They don't actually function the equipment.
And even if they did, they wouldn't know, they wouldn't know what he knows, you know what I mean? By having done the maintenance and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a huge gap when you look at these organizations. So I'm a part of 3 of them. So the Naval Institute, the Surface Navy Association, and there's also one specifically for Intel, the Naval Intelligence Professionals. And I listened in on, not a podcast per se, but like a speaking engagement just through some online, like a Zoom call, essentially, with the 2-star that runs all of naval intelligence for the entire Navy for 2 hours. He's just in there open Q&A while he's like sitting in his office. And I think there's about 100 people on the call.
So wait, let's rewind for a second. So just to recap, the admiral that's in charge of naval intelligence knows how to do an Ask Me Anything, but somebody else doesn't have time to answer any questions. Is that what I just heard? That's what it sounded like. That's what it sounded like.
We'll get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll talk on that. But it was it's something that's the invite only goes out to people that are in the organization.
Right.
And it's an opportunity to engage with these people that are 8 layers separated from you via echelon to ask them questions. Like I asked them about, there's a credential for intelligence. It's called Certified DoD All Source Analyst, SEDASA. And the fact that we don't graduate with that during some of our pipeline schools is like the equivalent of the fact that corpsmen right now can't graduate a school certified as an EMT. It's like, come on. What do you actually do, guys?
But also like the whole idea behind some of the realignments and like changing us to culinary specialists from mess management specialists was supposed to more closely align us with civilian blah, blah, blah. But then like when we go through our schools, it's like you could graduate them with a ServSafe certification, which is like a really low level, but common and pretty useful civilian used sanitation certification. Like you'll see it on the wall when you walk into like a Subway or something. And then you could graduate them at the end of A school as like certified through the American Culinary Federation as a culinarian. And it's like, again, like really low level things, but it's like a gateway to other things that would help get them a job when they get out of the Navy. And they don't do that nearly as often as they should, especially corpsmen. Like that's a one that is like so practical. And it's like in the thing, like you're doing the same thing as the civilian world, probably at a higher stress level and like at a higher difficulty level most of the time, outside of like trauma ERs and stuff. But it's like they don't like my buddy. I went to the Senior Enlisted Academy with him. Byron Pack is his name. Great dude. But we were talking about that. I'm like, what are you going to do when you retire? He was retiring as a senior chief IDC. And he's like, yeah, I got to go to school and get some certifications first. I'm like, why? Like you have infinitely more experienced than most of the people you'd be applying, but they don't have certifications or licensure or anything. So unless they do it in their free time,
And a lot of that goes on Netsy. It's not on the individual like communities. Like they know these things exist and they know that it's a good idea. But one of the things I was told by one of my Master Chief mentors is like, there was a comment on one of the posts I put on Reddit recently where they talked about like the true power in the Navies with that civilian contractor that retired 20 years ago that's been in the same office for 15 years and like. COs turn over and people come in and out, but they stay baked.
It's like the deep state. The Navy's got a deep state.
But
you're not wrong, though. Yeah.
No, and you don't know who this person is. You don't know how to email them. You don't know how to talk to them. Like they have so much institutional continuity. They have an incredible amount of influence over the Navy.
Right.
So I never, and this is something that will come up when we talk about not just MCPON, but like my perspectives on like senior naval leadership is they're so constantly in flux. How can we expect them to change everything?
Right.
It's not their fault. I think that
I don't know about that, but like, but you're right. The system is set up in a way that makes it a lot more difficult than it should be, for sure. I agree with that.
The only one that's different is Commander of Naval Reactors because they're in position for
it's like 8 years. Yeah. And that makes a lot more sense. Well, they're in the position 8 years unless they want you to be CNO like Richardson, and they're just like, actually, the rules don't apply. But because they pulled him after like 4. But it would be nice if they were in that position for a much longer period of time. Like it would make a lot more sense to me. But at the same time, like I feel like I don't know, like I do first to an extent. I feel like the fault, like they have to take ownership of the failures because a lot of them, it's like, and I know there's a lot behind the scenes we don't know, right? About like I was talking about that on that MCPON episode. Like the MCPON's doing a ton of things, and we're just not aware of it. And
I agree with your analysis that it comes down to communication strategy, which is the same thing that I've been talking about with these organizations. And I think I heard you right, but I like how you kind of framed that. Like there's a difference between fault and accountability. Like something can not be your fault, but you can assert ownership on it because you're a leader. And you'd be like, well, no matter who screwed it up or what screwed up,
it's
I'm
still
make
mine.
Sure this doesn't happen or gets corrected. And
like what I mean by that, as far as like them taking ownership of it, is like there's at a certain point there are things the MCPON can do. And I was talking to, it might have been you on Reddit. I forget. I was going back and forth with somebody about like taking it out for a spin and seeing what it can do. It's a line from I love this movie called The American President with Michael Douglas and Michael J. Fox. Pretty old. Annette Bening. And Michael J. Fox is portraying like I think he's like a political advisor or something, but he was like based on a real person, and he was just like talking about the president's approval rating is like really high. It's like, let's take it out for a spin and see what it can do, like to pass legislation. Same kind of thing. It's like when you have achieved, excuse me, like a fleet master chief position, you've got like a 20% chance of being MCPON best case scenario. So it's like, at what point do you just decide I'm probably at my terminal pay grade? So like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, and I'm not saying they're going to do anything that's going to get them on the cover of the Navy Times, but like talk with your admiral, make sure you're not stepping on any toes, and then start going hard. Like start doing things that actually matter to sailors. And I think they could do a lot more than they probably are. Again, I don't know exactly what they're doing, and it'd be really nice to get more transparency there through that communication strategy. But like, I also feel like you could just be a lot more vocal in your either support of or criticism of or whatever certain things. Cause like, I think that's the reason why what I do resonates with a lot of people is like, I mean, now I'm retired. So, you know, I don't know how much this is applicable, but like I was on active duty as a master chief, like openly criticizing certain things, like willing to admit the flaws in the mess. Hey, let's talk about it. And call those things out and say, we got to do better because these sailors deserve it. Like no one talks like that. And it's like, why don't they why not? Why can't we admit at the MCPON level that the chief's mess is broken? Cause it is. And it's like, I'm not saying there's not a lot of good that happens there. And there's not a tremendous capacity for good and like that it doesn't have a tremendous value to the organization if we are doing it right. But we're not doing it right. So it's like, why can't we openly talk about that? It's like the eval system where you have to write a flowery eval no matter what. It's like you're either good, really good, or amazing. It's not like you're behind and need a lot more work. So I can't write like this person is not ready for promotion. Like I have to write with continued development and training, they have the potential to develop into blah, blah, blah.
You can write that, but you have to, it takes a mountain of paperwork.
It has to be an SP eval too. So it's like they have to be in like NJP territory for that to happen, instead of me just writing an honest assessment of their performance without destroying their career for the next 5 to 10 years.
And that philosophy, I want to drop anchor on that real quick, because that leads me onto like two little things that I wouldn't say I say. It's something that I was given by my first senior chief in the Navy when I got mad when I was a little third class in Kandahar, Afghanistan. I mouthed off at a chief. Yeah. And my senior chief pulled me aside and he's like, "Look, you were wrong in how you handled that, even though you were absolutely right in what you were trying to do." Yeah. And, he was trying to get me to understand. And this guy, he was definitely jaded on the Navy, understandably so, because he was at his terminal pay grade and he knew it, but he took such good care of me. Yeah. So he told me 2 pieces of wisdom that I've always believed in. One, the Navy will promote you to your highest level of incompetence. Doesn't mean that you are Peter Principle, dude.
Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
There's a book called The Peter Principle, and you just said it. Like it's like hierarchies will promote you to your level of incompetence. Basically, it's an amazing book. I highly recommend it. But go ahead. Sorry, he must have read it because you just said what's on the cover of the book.
That's funny. And then the other thing he told me, and this is one that I even told my 06 nuclear reactor officer captain on my last ship. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about retention one day on deployment. I was like, "Sir, when you see somebody with a khaki belt and chief anchors or an oak leaf, it's probably safe to assume they weren't the best for the job. You just have to hope they were the best of what was left to promote, because our best people get out. That E5, E6, O3, they offer
predominantly. When people say things like that, I habitually push back, only because I don't wholly believe that. I think you're right, where like we lose a large amount of the best people, but also there's a lot of like competence and capacity left on the table because we never take the time to develop them either. Right. Like the leadership development education thing that I go so hard on. It's like, cause I would consider you probably one of those people, like granted, this is the first time we've ever talked, but like, so there's a chance that I'm wrong, but probably not. Probably not. But like, you stuck around. Why did you stick around? Right? Like you stuck around very likely because you're passionate about like a lot of the things that junior sailors wish they had and that drove them to get out. And you're like, nah, I'm going to stick around and fix this. So there are people out there like that. And I think there's more than most junior sailors assess there to be. But when they get to that level of incompetence, you don't see that. You just see flailing. You see like this panic induced groping in the dark for like how to be a leader, and they just don't have the tools. And I did it as an LPO. Like I regressed to my lowest level of training, which was the terrible leadership I had before that just yelled and screamed at me, which I swore I would never do. And that's why I stuck around to be the guy that was different. But then I freaked out when I was confronted with the responsibility of an LPO role on a submarine, because I was like, oh God, like I didn't know there was all this, like there's a bunch of stuff that as the E4 that knew everything was like, I could do this job so much better. When I got in the position, I like had no idea that there was all this other stuff that I wasn't aware of, but also I, as an E4 criticizing from the outside looking in, I didn't have all that pressure on me of that responsibility I felt to take care of those people. And I was like, I can't fail. Like it was like dying to me. I was like, I cannot fail these people. So I had this like really high level of anxiety to the point that I freaked out. I like just was like, I forgot everything and regressed to my lowest level of training until I figured out, oh God, I'm doing exactly what I said I would never do. And they all hate me and aren't listening to me anyway. And I got to reevaluate my whole life. So yeah, man. Go ahead. I feel
Oh no,
like
you're fine.
that thing gets said a lot by junior sailors, like basically that chiefs suck and officers suck, basically khakis suck because all the good people get out. And it's like that's not even a little true. Like it's in that not all of them get out. Like we definitely lose way too many really high functioning people because of leadership incompetence, but I think there's a whole bunch of really high functioning competent people that like incompetence combined with like what you were describing as like that senior chief, they just get beat down. Like, and the incompetence is part of that weight that they're carrying, but then they just get all the piss and vinegar beat out of them by circumstance and being like just being overwhelmed by all of the responsibilities and pressures, and they're undermanned, overworked, blah blah blah, and then it like you
I will say for context, this this senior chief had a more unique situation because this was 2011, so he was already a senior chief.
Okay, that's when
and
I
it was
chief.
only after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed that we found out he was gay. So he'd also grown up in the Navy from the 90s.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
So he definitely had a lot more personal interaction with that.
I'm interested. We'll talk offline, but I'm interested to either talk to you about him or talk to him literally if it's something he'd be willing to do. Because I came up in during my first submarine, it was still Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But like we had like two that I can remember off the top of my head. Like everybody knew they were gay. I hung out with one of them all the time. And it was like no one cared at all. And they were open. Like everybody knew, nobody cared. The going away party was like penis straws and pink headbands and like glitter and like, you know what I mean? Like, so I wonder what type of culture he experienced coming up, because like, if I talk to my buddy who I'm thinking of, or like the other guy, which the other guy had a really negative experience for other reasons, but it was based on he got like a false sexual assault accusation that turned into just a dumpster fire where once he got into like the court martial thing, it was like the Navy turned into that, like they failed him on so many levels. But like my other buddy, it was like, I don't know. I'm sure he may have experienced some like discrimination somewhere else in the Navy, but on that boat, I don't think it happened at all. Or if it did, I was just blissfully unaware because I was junior. So like if he was interacting with khakis and had to deal with some stuff, I never knew about it. But yeah, it seems to me, which again, I might have just had I had only my one perspective of it, but I am curious like what that experience was like, just because what I saw was so wildly different than what I hear sometimes, I guess. So, but yeah, anyway, we can talk offline about maybe talking.
That'd be interesting to talk offline about.
Yeah.
So we've gone down a couple of rabbit holes now. So we'll tie in back to.
I see squirrels.
Yeah, I love that.
Squirrels everywhere.
Hey, I am all for that. So we'll get into some of the meat potatoes of how
the MCPON thing. Let's go back to like. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I just like what were we talking about?
Because of so for context and transparency, I am on the board of directors for the Surface Navy Association, and no, I don't get like any kickbacks or anything. It's a nonprofit.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all volunteer based.
Duty. Yep. I'm the only active duty enlisted person on the board. There's a couple of other people there, so we've got a couple of retired fleet and fleet master chiefs like Joanne Ortloff.
Right.
We've got a couple of retired master chief petty officers of the Coast Guard. There's this great retired ABH-1. He was medically retired, and he's just an amazing person.
Awesome.
And then there's me, so like a very limited enlisted side. So we'll go to the conference this January, so 3 weeks ago, to get my confirmation. It's a paid for trip to DC. Kidnapped a junior officer from my ship because my ship was going through LOA. And I was like, hey, Kamo, you want to go on an adventure and not be on the ship for light off assessment?
It's like,
so
yes.
Yeah. It was great. And I love the fact that the CMC, the XO, the CO, like they were like, hey, you don't have a job in LOA. He doesn't have a job in LOA. We fully support this. Go forth. Have a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff like that, like making good judgment calls on who you actually need for mission. So I knew from my previous experience at this kind of conference that there's going to be some kind of enlisted event. So I get there. There's the post on Reddit where it's like Force Master Chief this, Fleet Master Chief that. We had 6 Fleet and Force Master Chiefs on the panel, but then about another 3 of them in the audience. So for your audience that don't know the math, that's about half of all the Fleet Force Master Chiefs. If any of those guys go to your command, that's an all hands call, and we have them in this
had
room.
all of them.
Like, we had half of them in the room with like 60 people. Most of the people in the room were chiefs. So command master chiefs, people that are SCA. So they brought a lot of people. I think there was 5 blue shirts in the entire thing, and it's like none of these people.
Wow, this is an echo chamber. Yeah, like what do we do?
Exactly.
This is
so
an
I
echo
posted
chamber.
on Reddit. So I posted on Reddit and said, "Hey, I'm at this conference. Here's the list of everyone that's here. Send me your questions, and I will relay it, and I'll do my best." I showed Joanne Ortloff what I was doing, and that's why I want to give her credit, because she passed the Reddit link.
She's the one that passed the note or whatever. Yeah.
So she passed it on the Fleet Force Master
Shout out
Chiefs.
to Joanne Ortloff. I love her, man. I've followed her social media presence for a hot minute. I do need to listen to her podcast, but she's great.
Yeah, she's awesome. So I passed her the Reddit link. She passed it to all those panelists. So that was the Tuesday night. Wednesday, MCPON's event was Wednesday morning. So Tuesday night, from what I've heard, garnered from listening to them talk, they all met together and read through the entire post that I had put, taking questions. So next day, MCPON had already been like briefed on it. He'd already read through it. So at the end of his panel, it was definitely a Fed question. So they asked the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard who he wanted to, like, do you have any shout outs or any acknowledgments? He talked about his family and stuff, good stuff. And then MCPON's like, yeah, there's a young chief I know is tapping away on his phone right now in this audience talking to Reddit. I was like, oh,
that's awesome. That would have been funny. Yeah, you have that moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm about to get lit on fire in public. But then he's like, actually,
DRB from MCPON,
like a public execution by MCPON. Yeah, like that would.
But he talked about that. He gave a shout out to me and the entire Navy subreddit. He talked about that he'd been reading through stuff since last night with the Fleet Force Master Chiefs, and so while they're on camera, he said, I promised to engage. So after the cameras were cut, he and the Fleet Forces Fleet Master Chief pulled me aside, gave me coins. They talked with me. I talked with his PA person, MCCS. And throughout the rest of the conference, I worked with some of the Reddit admin folks to like pass contact information, emails back and forth between them. And then I stepped out of the way and was wait and see. And then at some point during that week, because that thread that I originally posted got a pretty decent amount of engagement, like some 200-300 questions and comments. And it influenced another sailor. I think they're a retired chief. Anyways, I know his or her handle. It's Dirt Sailor. So he made a post about the office of the MCPON, and he's talking.
I think I know who that is. We'll talk offline.
Yeah, so he's talking about his perspective on the MCPON office's role. A totally separate thread. I just assumed it was somewhat influenced by the subject at hand. And MCPON's PA account just pops up in it. Like, hey, what up? We're here. And they get verified. So cool. That immediately was like, oh, okay, this is a shot across the bow. They're actually
something's happening,
And then the Reddit admins posted the MCPON arriving thread, and they continue to work between each other to find a good time for the AMA, and it happened. And I like what you said about and you're spinning the yarn about it. Like he jumped into the deep end, and I definitely respect his follow.
How can you not? Like, I love it. And it's for everyone else, it's like the good that you can take away from it if you're frustrated by the execution is like, he did it at all. Like, it's a huge leap forward. Yeah. It's a huge leap forward in their communicating with junior sailors via platforms that they actually engage on. So it's like, whether or not he fumbled the actual delivery is kind of irrelevant. Like it's not wholly irrelevant because obviously they wanted those questions answers, and it's really frustrating when you read it because I think Dirt Sailor is one of the ones that just had an essay of like 5 really well thought out questions, and there was like I saw like 10 of those where there were sailors that had spent like some real time on these questions, and then to not have them answered in the same in the same type of depth and detail that they spent developing those questions is really frustrating. But it's a huge deal that they even did it. So now, okay, yeah, now we got to be better next time. And hopefully there's more follow through, like they said, with like we're going to review it for the rest of the week and get back to you, because like no one could have kept up with the amount of demand that there was on that thread.
No.
But
and I think that's what blew them away too, is that
one, they're like, oh my God.
I'll say, I'll echo what you said. And it's the same thing that the Reddit AMA and BGW said, like people were good. They were professional. They were I was like
shocked at how well behaved everyone was, and that you got such robust, well thought out questions, and like I was really impressed. So it's like you can't put any of it on the Reddit thread population. It's like that was all just their failure to understand what they were walking into, because I think that the Reddit mods, people like you and even me, who like, I don't consider myself like some kind of Reddit expert, but like I've been around long enough I knew that was going to happen. Like I know the type of people that are in that thread, and I knew there was going to be like essay questions and really like thought provoking, like well-researched questions, and not in short supply. So it's like, I just think they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I think they thought they were going to do an all hands call on Reddit. And it's like, that's not what we're doing here. You know what I mean?
Well, and this is why I love that it happened though, because even as we wait to see what happens, it's not just that now they know, they can reference back to it. I would not be surprised
for sure.
The next time that MCPON and the Fleet Force Master Chiefs are all together, if they're not looking at some of this stuff together, because
or bouncing stuff off. Like I'd be in there like asking people questions. I'd be like, I might even like create a ghost account that no one knows is the MCPON and go in there and just be like, hey, if the Navy did this, how would you feel about that? And like, would it work? Would it not? Yeah, I mean, like, why not? Why not leverage that feedback mechanism? Because you're going to get like, you'll get some trolls, but like you're going to get some really great responses.
Oh, definitely. And the other takeaway for me was like, that's the entire interaction from when it started at the conference to the AMA is they are there. Even if they don't have accounts, they're watching. They are lurking.
I've known that for a hot minute. Yeah. Like they do. They lurk.
It was just surprising.
They and I mean I knew, because Paul Kingsbury like every 6 months a few years ago would be like, hey, I sent that podcast to every active Fleet and Force Master Chief, and this was like when I was still on active duty. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that, man. Like I don't want my CMC calling me in the office like going, what are you doing with your life? But yeah, I mean, I would defend every word I've ever said on the podcast, even if my opinions have evolved or my analysis has evolved with new information and experience. But it's like, I know they're lurking because I have analytics on SoundCloud where my RSS feed is. And it's like, I know you're listening, DC. I don't know exactly who, but I know you're listening. So, but I have had engagement, and I'm not going to, I've told people before, like I've had a few like active fleets and stuff reach out and try to get on the podcast, but I'm not. What my pushback is always like, we're not doing an all hands call. Like I'm going to ask you hard questions and I'm going to push you for answers. And if you're giving me word salad or non-answer answers or whatever, I'm not even going to publish it. And like, so I was communicating with some of those aides that were like asking me, to like, if like about getting them on. And I would be like, look, like between you and me, this isn't going to be what they probably think it is. Like, we're not just like doing all hands call stuff, which is what I've heard. Like anytime I've heard a fleet on another podcast, like Paul had Honia on when he was a fleet on the Cutlass podcast. And I was just like, that was part of the thing when I was talking to the aide that I was talking to. I was just like, look, I've listened to some of these and I'm just like, I'm not doing that. And it's not like, I'm not giving Paul a hard time. Like I get it, but like, there were no answers. There was like a discussion, but there was like a bunch of non-answers or really general like word salad thing. And I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why that even happens. And that's part of what I was saying earlier about the take it out for a spin and see what it can do. It's like, where's the harm in answering candidly and like really telling people what you think, especially being in the position you're in, because you're in the position to affect real change. So it's like, I don't understand, like, or just tell me the truth. Like, just tell me what's going on with a program. Cause that, like, you just get these really weird, like, standoffish type or I'll get to that later, or we don't have time for that right now, or whatever. And it's like, well, why? Like, and you can tell they're evading, and it's like, it's not even like a controversial topic. And then if I do ask you something like, why is the Chiefs mess, junior sailor divide such a problem and whatever, and it's like, you think they're going to answer that or take any ownership of it? Like, and I'm not saying everybody's all the same. Maybe there's a fleet or force out there that would, but I don't know. I was like, like I'm good. Like, so hopefully they start to develop that awareness and become a little more candid. Cause like, that's what the lack of authenticity is what kills a lot of sailors. Like, they don't trust or think there's any value in those. Yeah. They don't think there's any value in those positions because, like, what's the point, you know?
As you're talking about this, it made me think to myself, like, the way that I don't want to say like dance around and stuff like that, but the way that they engage with critical questions, if I wouldn't accept their answer from a selectee during chief season, then why is a whole fleet or force master chief given to me?
There was a comment on Reddit that I was such a giant fan of, where some Redditor was like, my only question is, would BM2 Honia accept the answers that MCPON Honia is providing? That was
such a good one.
I was like, boom! Like, I was like, t-shirts, stickers, like, make it happen. I'm like, this needs to be everywhere, because that was the best thing I seen the whole time, just because it was like, how does standing in front of this mirror feel, you know? And he's right, and it's like, or he or she, whoever said it, is correct. It's like, because BM2 Honia would not accept the like, don't ask me about beards, or like, or some of the other things that they either said, like, wouldn't answer, didn't answer, or the answer they provided was like the all hands call transcript thing that I lit up was like, it's so easy. Technology will do that for you. You won't even have to do anything. And then some E4 can just check grammar and spelling and post it. So it's like, no, this isn't hard at all. You just don't know how. It's different. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I think part of it is because we kind of touched on it. It's a generational thing. You very much were on active duty and grew up in a Navy where the Navy itself viewed social media as a liability, not a tool.
Yep.
And a lot of those chiefs from that time frame, they were taught not to engage, not to use social media. I think that it's going to take a few more years to really start getting the people that grew up in a Navy that was okay with that. But the problem is that doesn't do anything in the real time now, where we could be doing things better.
Right.
I know someday we are going to get naval leadership that is completely attuned with how to utilize a diverse communication strategy that's effective to the deck plates and does not cut out mid-grade leaders either. It's a fine balance to take. But what we see, what I've observed in my limited perception right now, is they can engage, and they either are concerned to engage because of how it makes themselves vulnerable. You know, they're going to get hammered, and they have to learn how to engage with humility.
I honestly think, though, that, and tell me how you feel about this, but like, I honestly think that transparency would go a lot better than what they're doing currently, even when they're wrong. You know what I mean? Like, because you through trusting the people enough to kind of let them in on it, because you can still, it's a balance, but you can still maintain the position of authority and hold certain things back as appropriate and blah blah blah, while still communicating really robustly about here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, here's why that's meaningful to you, and accept feedback and admit when you're wrong and all those things. And I think you get, people kind of eye roll at this point because Jocko's just everywhere, right? But when you listen to, I'm a big fan of his work, and when you listen to his like the origin story of like extreme ownership and all the stuff that he does, it's like when he was a task force commander in Iraq, there was a blue on blue incident, and instead of like his first instinct, just like a lot of people's, was to try to figure out who to blame. And then he was trying to develop this brief as his CMC and like Commodore level or CO or whatever flew out to see what the hell was going on and do an investigation. And he was trying to develop this brief, and he was just like, excuse me, sorry, cancer throat. He was trying to develop a brief for them to kind of let him know what was going on. And he had this like eureka moment of like, it's me. It's all on me. I'm in command. Like everything is my fault. And so he like went down that road of just accepting responsibility and saying like, because he described it at the brief. He was like, all right, what went wrong? And like he went around the room, and all these stakeholders were like, oh, well, I did this wrong, so it's on me, or I should have better communicated this, so it's on me. And he was just like, no, someone else, no. And like went around the room and basically absolved all those stakeholders of any culpability and just said, it's all my fault. I was in command. Everything's on me, and I take ownership of all that. And they let him keep his job after he had that type of incident, which, I mean, if you think about, I would equate like what happened. And I don't remember if there was loss of life. I think somebody got wounded. I don't remember if somebody died. I think an Iraqi counterpart might have died. But like I equate it to like a collision where somebody gets hurt or something like that, or some type of negligence that leads to like a man overboard where somebody's injured or killed, where like you're on the cover of the Navy Times and you don't have a job anymore. The end. Like, but
G off is coming for his article.
Yeah, but how much different could it have been? I don't know if it would have been. Like maybe this could, I'm sure a lot of the decision making was unique to special operations and his particular CO and CMC, but like but the way he dealt with it, like maybe if more people did it that way, they would keep their jobs. So it's like I always, and it's never failed me either. Like every single time I have something to say that's like some type of feedback that I'm like nervous about going to my superior and being like, you're doing this wrong, or this is a mistake, or here's what's going to happen when you follow through with this plan. It almost always ends in a productive conversation, if not a course correction, and it goes even better than I ever thought. But I'm always worried I'm going to get punched in the face, right? Or it's going to go negatively somehow. Even with my juniors, when I have to do a thing a certain way, like I've never had it go wrong. I've never lost any credibility or trust by going to one of my juniors and saying, hey, I'm sorry that I screwed that up. You know what I mean? Like or taking responsibility for why something went horribly wrong. Look, that wasn't your fault. That was my fault. I should have done better. I have a story about like we were getting ready to go underway. We were loading food. They never give us enough time to load food. So we're always working like 18-hour days, and it's just madness. So we're like rushing to stow all this food so we can go home and get 4 hours of sleep so we can come back the next day and hate ourselves even more. And I had a brand new seaman that had checked on board, like barely knows his way around the submarine, has never done a stores load before. And we store stuff in our fan room where there's like the induction and, yeah, I mean, you guys got fan rooms on other ships. We store a lot of stuff in fan rooms just because there's a lot of open voids and space to do it. But fans still got a fan, right? You got to stay clear of induction and suction and all that, and exhaust and all that crap. So this kid, not knowing any better, found this little like puka and just shoved laundry bags full of crap in front of the suction for a fan. So overnight, this fan smokes itself. Coming the next day, it's really obvious what happened. So my CO is thrilled because we're about to get underway. Like, and now the underway is potentially going to be delayed because they have to rip this fan out and then put a new fan in and all this other stuff. And like, usually I put eyes on everything. Like I'll walk in and check stowage, and I had every intention of doing that, but it's 11:30 at night. We're all dying. We're all tired. So my LPO walked through, said it was good. So I'm like, all right, let's go. You know, like, and we just left. I don't know if I would have caught it, but maybe. Like I was fatigued. Like none of it. You know what I mean? Like would I? Maybe I would have caught it just because more experienced. Like eyes. But that seaman was just like he hated himself. He was just first he thought he was in a ton of trouble, and he also like was so bummed that he like let everybody down and disappointed me and all this other crap. And I'm like, you're checking in still. Calm down. Like you're fine. You did nothing wrong. And my LPO is the one that came and told me that what was going, like that he did it and he knew he did it and he was already beating himself up. I'm like, go put him back together again. But also don't tell a soul it was him. And then I was just like, it's my fault. And they were like, who did it? And I'm like, I did it. It's my fault. Like I didn't go in there and check. So it's my fault. And my CO was fine with like punching me in the face for not going in there and checking. I was like, my LPO checked. I took his word for it. I feel like I should be able to do that, but we were fatigued. And so like, yeah, I should have went in there and checked. But it was like with that kid, it's like, I can take that punch in the face. First of all, like I was already a senior chief. It's like, whatever, like, what are you going to do to me? But also like, it really is on me. No matter how abstract I decide to like go down this, like the extreme ownership type road where it's like in this case, like, yeah, there's a really great case to be made that I should have went in there and looked. And I don't wholly disagree with it. I think I had trained my LPO well. He knew what to look for, but we were all fatigued and human error is a thing. But also like, yeah, I should have went and checked. And it became a thing where I was much more sensitive to it going forward. But it's like, I'm like, it's me. It was me. It's my fault. Punch me in the face. If somebody's getting an LOI, it's me. Somebody's, you know what I mean? Like if something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to me because I failed. I failed in my leadership role and nobody else was culpable. And it's like, if you did more stuff like that, when I did that, like all I got was an increase, like a spike in trust and faith in my ability to lead. And that I cared about them and I had their best interests at heart. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't understand the fear, like based on the public position, like I'm worried about perception hindering the ability to do my job. And it's like what you're doing right now by being detached and standoffish and not transparent, that's hurting you a lot more than you being like open and honest and taking responsibility for all this stuff ever would. And it's not like, I don't know Honia and how he's going to navigate a lot of this stuff. I'm kind of making some assumptions because he's only been in MCPON for like 5 minutes. So like, I don't feel like we have a large enough sample size to be able to make any kind of analysis, but it's
no, I think this event all came because he came in the office in September, right at the,
I think, or November
kicked off. And then he didn't go to the office in the Pentagon. He went straight on travel. So he's been traveling the fleet
sort of
from the start. And then this event, both in DC and then the Reddit interaction was really kind of the end of his, we'll say taking command, his tour.
Yeah, his tour, yeah.
His check-in.
I feel like that's pretty typical, isn't it? Of like when they first get in office, they jet set around the whole Navy to like take the pulse or whatever the goal is. So yeah.
Well, he's definitely got a giant thread of like 700 questions, comments, interactions for a good pulse
from his office. So it's like, did you need to fly around it? Because then it's like when they're jet setting around the fleet, they're doing all hands calls where pretty much 99% of the people in that room are afraid to ask a question because the walls are lined with their chiefs, just like, I dare you.
Just like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So you'll get that one guy. You'll get that one guy that's ready to risk it all. But otherwise, it's like none of those other kids, all those other kids just want to go on Liberty on time. So they're like, I'm not saying anything.
That was me. I got punched in the face as an IS-1 for asking MCPON Smith something I shouldn't have. And it was actually a really good learning. Like, instead of the command there, like, punishing me, like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They were mad at, they were not happy, but they used it as a teachable moment. They really did. That's
good.
And
good.
Yeah.
What'd you ask him? I'm curious. Well, what's the T? What'd you ask him?
So
can you say it? I don't want
to. Well, I'm trying to just think how to frame it because it's going to go into one of the things I talked to you about on email that I'm not afraid of talking about.
Okay.
So I was on an Air Force base And during my first divorce, my ex-wife had accused me of assault. And being on an Air Force base, there was no DSO. So I had a lot of issues, having legal representation.
And
because
for those
Air Force base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, so it's defense service office. It's where you go for like a defense attorney. Like regular legal is not that. You got to go get a defense attorney. But that's, anyway.
So here's the interesting thing. And so essentially my question, which I thought was valid, was there was a Air Force equivalent defense office on the base. UCMJ is UCMJ. Why can they not help me? They couldn't even talk to me. They should be able to.
Why?
But
just because you're not in the Air Force?
Because I'm a different branch.
Oh,
yes.
So stupid.
Because
that's so
I was
stupid.
like, UCMJ is UCMJ. So that was my question, because I thought it was something that maybe the MCPON at the time could influence, or like just take a look at, like, hey, a JAG is a JAG is a JAG across the branches. There's nuances,
you would think.
Yes, but UCMJ is UCMJ. So that was my question. The JAG at the combatant command, which was in 05, was really mad. And I got to take that L. I do.
I don't understand why. I think
I framed the question wrong, or they didn't understand my question.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it made it sound like, I think their fear was that I was saying that I didn't get legal help and I was getting railroaded by the command, which was not true. That command took such good care of me. So gotcha. I take ownership that maybe I communicated it wrong, but I still to this day stand that it was like this interaction proves. How can they not help us if we're in a joint environment?
Yeah.
Like anytime I wanted to talk to a Navy
absurd.
Legal, I had to do intake paperwork and get a different lawyer and wait for San Diego to call me for a week. Meanwhile, so even though Air Force legal couldn't talk to me for defense,
they could prosecute you though.
all my interrogations were done by all my interrogations were done by OSI, not NCIS. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so, you can have it one way, but not the other. So that's that rabbit hole. But that was my question essentially.
Okay.
And I still like I said, I still kind of stand by that, because
I would have
had a lot less mental health and anxiety issues while going through that circumstance.
Yeah.
If I had had better access to legal to help me understand what was going on, because that was the longest year of my life waiting for that thing to clear. And it's an experience. It really is. And I actually credit that a lot for that experience of having to look self in the mirror and like, what am I going to do after court martial? Like, I didn't know which way it was going to go.
You never really do. Even like that buddy I mentioned that was falsely accused, he was gay and it was a male to male interaction, and this was don't ask, don't tell. So he went to court martial and they couldn't convict him of any other charge other than conduct unbecoming. He was a first class. And they reduced him to rank, and they reduced him to E1 and put him in prison for a year, which he served like 4 months and then won an appeal where it all got vacated because it was all just complete, it was complete garbage. And like, it was a bizarre scenario too, because everybody knew he was full of it, because we were like, I was at the party, like he did. And this kid that they were accusing, I'm like, he's a good friend of mine, and he was like our friend group mom. Like, it was all dudes that were on a submarine together. And I mean, I would get blackout drunk. I mean, this is like, I'm an E4 back then, or E5, young E5. I would get blackout drunk when we would party, and he's the one that would make sure I would get home safe. I'm like, if he was going to take advantage of somebody and sexually assault them when drinking, he would have done it a long time ago. He had every opportunity, and I wouldn't have even remembered it. And neither would it's like our friend groups. It was like 15 dudes that would all go out together, and we would all party, and we would all like get hammered, and we all implicitly trusted this dude. So we're all like everybody. And on top of that, like the whole command loved him too. So like, it was really bizarre because everybody knew this kid was like, basically what happened is he got curious for whatever whether he was gay or some other orientation that I'm unaware of. He got curious, fooled around with this guy, and then like panicked that, oh my God, people are going to judge me or whatever. And he was drunk. So he jumped in his car and left. and it got pulled over for a DUI. And so he said, I'm fleeing the scene of a sexual assault. And it's like, that's not what happened, bro. Like, at all. Like, this kid would not, he's the type of guy that wouldn't do it without consent, like explicitly. Like, he's such a nice guy. He wouldn't step on an ant. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's like he ended up like when you went into the court martial, we were all at the court martial, everybody's in whites, and it was like the guy that was accusing him falsely, on his side of the courtroom, it's like empty besides his legal team, and on the accused side, which was my buddy, I almost said his name. I don't want to do that unless he gave me permission, but it's the entire ship was there, on top of like all these other tertiary people. Like, the whole courtroom was packed in support on his side. You had like the entire chain of command risking it all as like character witnesses and stuff. Like, they're all just going up there like, this amazing human being, amazing person, like all his roommates, everybody. It was just like, it was so insane. And then it all got vacated because there wasn't even any evidence anyway. And so they just convicted of conduct, because in his defense, he admitted he was gay. That was what ended up happening, was because he had to like defend himself, but then they convicted him of conduct unbecoming and then sentenced him like he got convicted for the sexual assault. It was insanity. But yeah, that kind of stuff drives me crazy, because like, I was talking to somebody the other day about like being concerned about them warping the UCMJ to suit their purposes. Cause like, he's a dude that was part of a beard study that they did recently, and he started posting all these Instagram reels. Somebody posted some of his links on Instagram or on Reddit in that thread about when people were asking about beards. That's how I found him. But he got told to like stop. Like, his chain of command was like, stop posting that stuff. And he's like, no. And I'm like, what? He like told his CO, and everyone just straight up just like, nah, I don't think I'm going to do that. And he had done his research on what he's allowed to do and what he's not allowed to do. And he's like, you can't tell me not to do this. Which, I mean, I haven't done the research, maybe but I'm like, I know what they can do. And what they can do is find something in the UCMJ to convict you with. So I'm like, were you concerned at all that they could like warp it to suit their needs if they decided they just wanted to drop an anvil on your head? Because they can. And that's what's ridiculous and kind of terrifying about it. Hopefully it's gotten better. Like, I mean, it sounds like your circumstance was stressful, obviously, but
yeah, it definitely was stressful.
Yeah,
but it cleared out the way it had to.
It should, or
without going into too much detail, but mine was a little different than his, and I actually don't mind talking about mine. I actually talk about it with junior sailors from time to time to help them understand, like.
Well, let's get into it if you're cool with it, man. Like, I'm a big fan of like, if you're comfortable and feel good talking about it, like being vulnerable, like talking about vulnerable things like that. Like, I talk about my mental health stuff all the time, because like, I feel like it's a big deal to junior sailors to hear like a chief talk about it, or hear a master chief talk about it, or whatever. Like, I have mental health problems too. So like, let's get into that. And like, obviously whatever detail you're comfortable with.
Yeah, so first marriage, really the important thing here is understanding consent. So, and that's kind of how I frame it when I talk with sailors, because like, I'll talk about this when we do like our annual GMTs on stuff. Because like I also mentioned it for the perspective of the audience, in 2015, I was sexually assaulted by another male sailor. I did the full unrestricted report and everything. So I'm one of... I've never met anyone else that talks about it. I know I'm probably not the only one, but I've been on both sides of this. I've been both the victim and the accused in the span of about 2 years. So it's something I take very personally, obviously, having been on both ends of that. And the thing with my accusation is there was never a question, kind of similar to the circumstance you walk through, about if any type of intercourse occurred. There was contact. The thing that I didn't know, because I just gotten back from deployment, was that my then wife had gotten a prescription for Ambien while I was on deployment, and had also gone to bed after me and drank half a bottle of wine before she came to bed. Which means...
can't really consent because she was on another planet.
She can't consent. But I didn't know that because she was the one that woke me up and initiated contact. It was only in the morning after where she had no recollection of what had occurred. So what ended up being the determination, what I was told, is obviously, and this is why I thought I was going to go to court martial. Is like there's not a question. Like I was straight up with them, like, yes, this occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're into a matter of context, consent, and culpability. So did I know, or is it reasonable that I should have known?
Right.
And the answer was no, thankfully.
Yeah.
But like, as much as I despise my first ex-wife for some of the stuff that she did afterwards, because she became physically abusive and emotionally abusive to me, which is fair. She felt, I assaulted her.
She felt like she had been assaulted, but gotcha.
I have to take that with some humility, even though it doesn't justify her then.
It's not,
to this day, I can't like call her nasty names or something. She is medically a victim of this. I'm just not legally responsible for what occurred.
Yeah.
And that's a very complicated and nuanced position.
Right.
And it is still something to this day that kind of keeps me up at night. There's still, even, let's see, this was 2016. So we're 7 years on now, and I still get anxiety. I still like,
I believe it, man. Stuff. I feel like I'm wired in that way where like, even when they told me I wasn't responsible, I would still have those moments of like, basically like saddling myself with the burden of like, I should have been clairvoyant somehow. You know what I mean? Or like there should have been a way that I knew or whatever. You know what I mean? Like get kind of going almost too far with like trying to convince myself that like, wait, maybe I should have known. Like maybe I really should. Maybe there was something I missed, or maybe I like just trying to find a way to blame myself. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's something that you struggle with, but I do that with a lot of stuff where I'm just like, it's like I have to have people talk me down sometimes with like certain things where I'm like, I could have and should have done better. And like my CMC used to call it with just like regular work stuff. I have this attitude of like can, should, shall, right? Like that's what he called it, where it's like, if you can, you should, and if you should, you shall, right? And that's like, I developed this expectation of leaders in particular, where I'm like for a chief, like if you have a leadership opportunity to take care of a sailor, if you can, you should, if you should, you shall. So it's not, you're not going above and beyond, you're just being a good chief. And I expect that of you. You know what I mean? And then I applied that really harshly to myself, and then that got all weird. And like, I don't know. It can get really bizarre when you get caught in that like doom cycle of like trying to blame yourself for stuff that like, I don't even know if you can come up with an answer to that. You know what I mean? Like
it's as much as I hate everything that happened from that, especially like the fact that I will always be the villain in that person's narrative, and I have to just take ownership on that. Yeah. My duty to pay that back is always like reflecting on how much that experience forced me to grow. Like that was my finally growing up in my mid-20s moment, was going through that experience, and it's become such a hugely formative part of me. Like being willing to talk about it, like sit down with sailors on the mess decks over coffee and talk about these experiences, because you're right, chiefs don't talk about this stuff. I forget which Fleet or Force Master Chief it is, but he talks about his moment. He's done so on camera before. That's why I even feel comfortable talking about where he was assaulted growing up as a child, never talked about it, bottled it up, and it wasn't until he was a CMC that it came out. And I heard him tell the story when I was at the symposium in DC. And it, even as a chief and someone that's been through it, it was still powerful to be like, wow, he's actually up there saying it.
Yeah, Jeff Bayless does that. Like he assaulted as a kid. I don't know the specifics of the story, and I don't know if he's ever shared it, but he has shared that happened growing up. And that was something that he just avoided and bottled up. And part of the, like, he was one of those like hyper overachievers, workaholics that, I mean, he made every rank first time up. He was a chief in like 6 or 7 years, and then he got picked up for deck LDO. He's a boatswain's mate chief. And then he was a JG about to put on lieutenant and got into a blowout argument with his ex-wife. And then he'd been drinking, jumped in his truck to leave that argument without doing anything stupid, and they got pulled over, or he got in an accident actually, and then you know how it goes from there. Ends up getting reverted back to chief, finishes his career, retires, but he started based on all the things that happened. It like that ended up being his formative experience of like turning him into the dude he is today, which is like one of my favorite humans breathing. And like, he has an amazing podcast. He goes around the fleet still to this day, even now that he's retired, flies around and talks about, like where he was at. Like, so that happens. It led to the career stuff that happened. He got to a point where he was like suicidal and like having a really hard time because all his self-worth was tied up in his career and his status as this guy with this gold SWO pin that made it from the bottom all the way up to a dude he was driving an aircraft carrier around, like, and then when all that got taken away, he had to like really assess like, who am I? What gives me value or whatever. Like he had to like rebuild everything. And he does these really crazy candid talks out on ships and at shore commands and stuff that are incredible. But those types of things, it's like, and like you talking about it too, it's like it means so much to sailors that have gone through it to hear your stories, man. Like it's incredible. And it's like, and it really illustrates like not just like how far you can come, like stuff like that happens. Like I talk about like the cancer and the mental health stuff all the time. And it's like, I am such a better person. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm bizarrely healthier than I've been in my entire life. I have a bunch of issues still, but like I had all these sleep issues and all this other stuff that I had to go through the cancer stuff to get fixed. And then once it's like I sleep, it's still not great, but it's like, it's a lot better than it was. So like my quality of life's way better. I'm able to do more. I'm able to, you know what I mean? And it's so weird because it's like, I lived most of my adult life in this like reduced status, not even really understanding what it was or why. And that had implications on my mental health and all this other stuff. But then you come out of the other end of these experiences, like just better. And it's so weird because when you're in it, it's all negative. Like when you say to somebody like, oh yeah, I had cancer. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And it's like, I'm not like, thank you. But like, thank you. But like, I'm not, it was weird. Cause I went into it almost feeling like, it had like, of course I have cancer and like that there's something I need to learn from this. Like, that's why it's happening. And it was so weird that cause I felt that immediately at the beginning. I talked to my mom about it and I'm just like, this is so, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of any, like, I mean, I freaked out when brain surgery happened a little bit. Like I was like, oh, I could die here. Like this is sketchy. But like then with radiation and everything else, I was just like, I wasn't really thinking about it that way. Like I knew I was going to be fine, but I knew there was something that like I needed to learn something from this and I'll come out the other end better and blah, blah, blah. So like, it's super strange. And you're like, because like, that's what you're explaining. And that's why it made me like, think about, I'm like, it's so weird how that works, where you go through these horrific experiences and circumstances, but like, if you can navigate it and like, do the things you need to do to deal with any mental health implications and everything else, like you come out the other end of it like just a whole new version of yourself that I would argue is pretty much always better if you deal with it in a healthy way. And it's like
a weightlifting regimen for emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, it's like that's a great way of articulating it. It's like the only way you can like exercise that muscle is by going through just this crazy adversity, but then like finding the mechanisms to deal with it in a healthy way. And if you do the work, damn, like I mean, I have so many more tools. I'm much more empathetic. Yeah, like it's all of it. Like it's made me an infinitely better person. And it sounds like it did for you too. And it gives you that teaching tool as well, which I think is amazing that you're using that.
It's what it's about, because eventually these sailors are going to have to relieve me, whether I retire at 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever my wife now will let me do. Eventually, because I don't want to stay in. Like I can't decide if I want to go officer, go warrant officer. My mentors want me to become a master chief. I'm up for senior chief now. Like the world is still my oyster, but
it is
obviously
very
the
much
number one priority right now is I got that first kid on the way. Like spent 2 hours today watching a birthing class thing with my wife, and how to change a diaper and stuff. I'm like, oh man, I have no idea what I'm getting into, and I'm so excited about it.
Good luck, man. Like I don't have any kids, and we have that conversation a lot of the time, and I'm just like, I can barely take care of myself. Like, I'm a horrific adult. Like, I'm working on it, and I think I'm getting a lot better. Me and my wife really are putting our back into it this year. Is like, we got frustrated with like just being bad adults. Like, we just let a lot of stuff go because there's no one here to tell us otherwise. You know, like, it's like I need an adult supervisor, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I look at it and I'm like, I'm sure I would rise to the occasion, but like, I just think about it. I'm like, how would I do that? I don't understand how I would manage that. Even now, I don't work, man. I do this and I go to college full time. I still am like, I can't even imagine. Like, I can't even imagine having that type of responsibility.
Yeah. Like I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
All I know is that I look at it the same way that I look at sailors. I get to help that little child, just like I get to help sailors become a better person, a better version of themselves through my experiences and my gaffes and my failures.
Right.
You know, the best good leaders learn from example. Better leaders learn from those that screw it up. Like watching, learning, growing. It's a similar feedback mechanism. So I'm going to approach it like that. But for the listeners that are going to be listening to this, I'm not going to approach it like a chief. I'm going to approach it like a humble leader,
like a person.
Sometimes those things are not a perfect circle on the Venn diagram.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Like,